Hello everyone. It's really difficult to start after Melinda put expectations so high, so I'll try to. So that's where I started, or when I started, what I was kind of trying to turn into a PhD thesis, which was completed in 2016, 1 year after that, and some publications followed that. So my talk will be kind of about this journey, starting with that presentation, turning into the PhD, and the subsequent publications based on the PhD thesis. So, tracking the development of online L2 interaction competence using conversation analysis is the title of my talk. So I'll briefly talk about conversation analysis, and I'll also draw on the concept of interactional competence in an L2. In my case, it's English as an L2. And of course, I'll also focus about online interaction, which I kind of relate my research to computer-assisted language learning aspect of the language learning literature. So I'll present the longitudinal development of online L2 interactional competence. All the participants who are involved in my project. I don't know if you mentioned, but I'm based in Turkey, Hacettepe University. We also have a research center, Hacettepe University Microanalysis Network Human Research Center. And it was one of the things that kind of shaped or took me into the conversation analysis, of course, thanks to my supervisor, So this talk will be about mainly conversation analysis. I'll try to keep it very brief because we have a workshop following my talk and following the very short coffee break. And we'll talk about conversation analysis with all the details at basic level, let's say. And then I'll again just briefly talk about conversation analysis as part of my presentation as well. So I'll also talk about social interaction and how it is different when it's online. So online social interaction will be another topic. And as for L2 interaction competence aspect of my talk, so as the interface of conversation analysis and online social interaction in an L2, I'll draw on the concept of L2 interaction competence and try to show you how I track the development of the participants longitudinally. So it will hopefully give an insight into the understanding of online learning in and of social interaction. So I designed this talk to reflect what I've been doing for the last couple of years, and these are the publications that came out. I put them all over here because they are also how I will proceed and how I will move on with this talk. So I'll talk about different papers that came out lately. Actually, this one came out yesterday, so I had to change the presentation to put the year over there, so it's not 2018. So I'll just move one by one through the papers, and I'll try to combine them each other to show how I'm kind of trying to add online L2 interactional competence to the L2 interactional competence literature that is already there. Okay, so let's start with the methodological background of my study, conversation analysis. Really briefly, conversation analysis is a research methodology that is used to explicate the ways that the interactants co-construct meaning through the systematic order of talk and interaction. So, construction of meaning is the main thing that we need to focus on, because when the participants engage in social interaction, they also show their situated understanding of the other participant or participants, if it's a multi-party interaction, just like in my case. So when they respond to a previous term, they also show their understanding of the previous term. And when they come up with this kind of contribution, they also pave the way for the previous participant to keep contributing based on the person, based on the participant that came up with a contribution. So these kind of micro details, really basically, also gives us a way to understand how each participant in a social interactional exchange make an understanding of the other participants and how they co-construct meaning in situ. So, conversation analysis gives the researchers kind of a tool to understand how these mechanisms work, based on the socio-analytical tools, namely turn-taking, sequence organization, preference organization, and repair. So everything starts with a single turn. So one of the participants come up with a turn, which consists of different turn constructional units. At the end of each turn constructional unit, there's a transition relevance place, which is a place the other participants can jump into the conversation. So at micro level, everything starts with a TCU, and TCUs come together to bring about a turn. So participants take and allocate turns, and while they do that, they also show understanding of each other. So when you bring two terms together related to each other, basically you have a sequence. So question as the first term and an answer as the second term. A contribution from the first participant, another contribution from the second participant. So you bring terms together to have sequences. And these sequences are organized in a way that has an underlying preference in it. So when I invite someone to do something, my interactional expectancy is to get accepted. I wouldn't like to do that, to hear a rejection. So these kind of preference organization also underlies. So turns, sequences, and when you bring sequences together, you basically have a conversation. When you go deep into the micro details of interaction, you kind of have an understanding how the meaning is co-constructed in this case. And when there is a trouble in hearing or understanding the ongoing talk, we have repair as one of the socio-analytical tools. So, some of the main principles of CA which would relate to my talk. The focus is always on the co-construction of social actions, because we are talking about social interaction. So, as part of the learning aspect and the participants as situated learners in given interactions, we always have a way to see situated learner achievements, turn by turn, minute by minute, and line by line, understanding of how these learner achievements occur. Okay, so members' methods for accomplishing context-specific social actions. Context-specific social actions is another keyword that I'll keep using throughout the presentation, because each social interactional exchange kind of occurs in a specific context. And as participants of interaction, we kind of draw on the context to have an understanding of each other while engaging in interaction. And we have our methods to make sense of each other while engaging this kind of social interaction. And this also gives us a way to understand meaning-making procedures. And conversation analysis, just like as in SLA and literature, meaning-making is something really, really important. And conversation analysis kind of gives us a robust methodological tool to understanding meaning-making procedures. So another important thing to focus on is the unique perspective. Unlike a thick perspective, so the focus is always on the participants. Rather than importing some research with relevant categories, you try to understand how participants make sense of each other. And next term for procedure, again, turn by turn, so the second term should give you the evidence that you use to record what happened in the first term and in relation to the second term. Okay, so how to make sense of online social interaction using CA, and why I mainly, or the part that I focus in terms of conversation analysis and my data, online social interaction data. So one of the things that conversation analysis literature brings to online social interaction research as the laminated view or co-construction or knowledge in action, or also known as cooperative action. So there are different layers in interaction. Tall is a layer, but when it's online interaction, there are different layers. How the participants orient their screens, for example. How do they make sense of the media that they are engaged in to realize the online interaction? In my case, I focused on multiple interaction resources for accomplishing social interaction, social actions. And orientations to screen was something that I was interested in, and something that we try to describe. So, how do participants use screen-based resources as part of the talk and interaction that is unfolding, and how do participants turn their screen into a shared resource was another thing to focus on. So, the participants also orient to various interactional media. For example, we sometimes engaged in a Skype conversation or Google Hangouts conversation, as in my daytime, but we do not necessarily keep the video chat open all the time. Sometimes we go and check our Facebook messages, we do some Google searches, and we sometimes just check out our folders to bring something to the interaction that will contribute something to the interaction. So everything we do on our screens can be connected to the unfolding interaction at some point. And when it happens, when it becomes part of the unfolding interaction, it is kind of a focal point for conversation analysis, because it is made observable by the participants. So conversation analysis gives us a way to examine that. And there is actually quite a lot of research about the interface of online social interaction and conversation analysis. I only put some here. Hamza Tuduni's book, in addition to all the articles, also quoted by Melinda, her book in 2010 is text-based interaction, so some of the main studies. And Chris Chang's book in 2014 is on audio-based interaction, so no video chat, it's audio-based interaction, chat rooms actually. And there are two review studies to start with by Gonzalez-Lure, both published in Calico Journal in 2001, 11 and 15. So they both provide a review of CA research on CMC and call. And a recent book chapter by Tuduni and Lidicott, so it provides another review of CA research on CMC and call with some updates on recent publications as well. So text-based, audio-based, and review papers, and our contributions to this literature is based on multiple resources, but mediated by the video-based interaction. Okay, so how do I analyze online auto-social interaction data? Again, we'll focus on this as part of the workshop. So just to briefly go through how this works from scratch and how everything turns into PhD thesis or research papers. So everything starts with collecting naturally occurring token interaction data. In my case, it is screen recordings from all the participants involved in the task-oriented interaction. But it's also possible to collect online auto-social interaction data using cameras positioned toward the screens, also capturing the participants having an interaction. Webcams is another way that people use a lot to record online auto-social interaction data. In my case, screen recordings was quite useful because I was also interested in how participants make sense of their screens while they are engaging in task-oriented interaction. So after collecting naturally occurring token interaction data, things move on with doing some orthographic transcription. Not going into too much detail, but just to understand what's happening in your data, you start doing some orthographic transcription. And after doing some orthographic transcription, next step is to do unmotivated looking. So you look for some potential cases. You do not do CA, you do not use CA to prove some theories or hypotheses, but you look for emergent cases from data itself. So you kind of listen to the data and you kind of try to make sense of the data, and you try to see what's potentially, what can potentially turn into a case. After the unmotivated looking, detailed transcription will be the next step. We'll have the transcription convention as part of the handout for the workshop, so you'll see it there. And determining potential cases and phenomena after the detailed transcription. Yes, we have some potential cases in mind, but after doing the detailed transcription, we can have a better understanding, because we now see all the silences, rising and falling intonation, and all the micro details that people use to make sense of each other as part of that. So we are ready to determine a potential case. After determining the potential case, the next step will be to look for recurrent, similar, or divergent cases which can turn into an argument for a thesis or a paper. Or the other way to go in this order is to track the change in members' method or the co-construction of social actions, as I did. So something that occurred in earlier processes, and to track that thing longitudinally to see if there is any change in terms of the methods that the participants use. So by doing these two steps, or while doing these steps, you also create collections. And after creating collections, you are ready to choose representative extracts to build the argument that you kind of support based on the case that you determine. After choosing the representative extracts and putting them into the physical papers, you are ready to analyze the extract and report your conversation analytic findings. And after you're done with it, after doing pure description of the unfolding interaction, you can engage in post-analytic discussions where we usually provide some implications for the fields that we're also interested in, just like SLA or FOR. Okay, so how did CA dealt with learning in and of interaction so far? I'm going to show two main lines of research in terms of CA and learning, but there are many other strands, or there are many other people following different paths to make sense of learning using CA. The first one is to track the change in participation frameworks. So how did a participant participated to social interaction, let's say in the first week of language classroom, and how did this participation framework change throughout the time, longitudinally? Did the student start to participate more? If so, how did that happen? Describing how did that happen gives us a way to evidence learning in interaction. The second path to do that is to track the developmental L2 interactional competence, just like I did with my research. So developmental L2 interactional competence gives two ways to track learning longitudinally. The first way is to track the diversification of interaction resources. I'll show some examples. And the second way to do that is increase the ability for context-sensitive conduct. So my contribution to this path is to conceptualize, or try and conceptualize, online aspect of L2 interaction competence, online L2 interaction competence, and how it happens. So, brief definition of what L2 interaction competence, because the rest of the talk will kind of focus on L2 interaction competence to show some of the outputs based on my data. So, L2 interaction competence is the ability to mutually coordinate. So, how each participant coordinate in orientation to other participants. So, also to co-construct actions, the ability to co-construct actions in order to do things with other participants. So it is kind of the main motivation for social interaction, doing things with other participants. So it is part of the definition of the L2 interaction competence as well. This can be done by maintaining the progressivity of talk, so how each participants take turns, allocate turns, and how do they manage to maintain the progressivity of talk is an essential part of L2 interaction competence. And this can also be done by displaying the local relevance of upcoming action, or to put it another way, analyzing the previous turn to produce a turn. Because you just heard a turn, you just analyzed that in a straight way, and you just came up with a response to that. So you showed your understanding of the previous turn, and you also showed an interactional competency in an L2, because you're using an L2 to do that. Interactional competence also includes deployment of linguistic, pragmatic, interactional, or semiotic resources, such as turn-taking, repair, and sequence organization toward the accomplishment of social actions, which brings us directly to conversation analysis. Unlike the widely known communicative competence idea, interactional competence focuses on interaction and focuses on the achievements of participants in interaction. So rather than focusing on individual abilities, you focus on abilities that are co-constructed in interaction. And the strong relationship with the socioanalytical tools of conversation analysis is mainly due to it is something that occurs entirely in social interaction, and it is something 100% observable in interaction. So, based on this definition, how do you track the development of healthy interaction and competence? The first way is to create the diversification of interaction resources, and the second way to do it is increase ability for context-sensitive content. Just to give an example, turn-taking, the basic interactional mechanism. How do you track the development of healthy interaction competence in terms of turn-taking? There are many examples in the literature, just to show some of them. For example, tracking the progressive complexification of terms, the increasing number of term instructional units, or maybe the terms kind of turn into extended terms from short terms longitudinal. So this will give you a progressive complexification, step by step, from time to time, progressing into a more developed turn-taking mechanism in interaction, or diversification in turn types, from only producing responsive second parts or adjacent pairs to first pair parts. So from initiating the, or from just responding to a participant to initiating the conversation by constructing a turn can be a way to do it. And it creates an ability to design and time turns according to the local circumstances or the interaction. So basically, responding without delay. In earlier periods, let's say, there are many delays in interaction, but throughout the time, if you spot a reduced amount of delay, it can be an indication of the developed healthy interactional competence. Okay. So, how do I bring L2 interactional competence and online interaction? The first way, the first part that we focus, is the context-specific social actions in online interactional settings. And in my case, it is the interaction of geographically dispersed participants. So they're not co-present in the same environment, but they are in their dorm rooms, houses, in front of a computer, trying to accomplish the task that I allocated, and I'll introduce you to the task that I provided to the participants. And we're referring to that as context-specific social actions, and in terms of geographically dispersed participants, it is different than how it occurs in the social interaction of physically co-present participants. Obviously, right? I mean, it would be a different kind of an interaction if everybody engaging in online interaction is positioned in the same room. But it would be a different story if people are located in different settings. So the question is, how does that happen? And drawing on the context was another focus. How do the participants use the resources that are available on their screens? How do these participants bring these resources to their interactions? And in my case, screen orientations was a thing to focus. How do participants perform web searches oriented in interactional media, text, audio, or video, clicks, visits to diverse web resources, and most importantly, how do the participants bring all of these contextual orientations to their social interactions? How do they make their orientations to their screen observable to the researcher and to the other participants, of course? And of course, in relation to that, after drawing on their context, how do you manage multiple resources? Because they engage in online talk, but it's not only talk, they also show orientation to their screens, they also show orientation to the task interface in my case, or the chat interface, Skype screen, Google Hangouts screen, and they are doing everything at the same time to make sense of each other. And tracking the development of how all of these things happen was kind of the ultimate focus of my research. So let's start talking about the research outputs based on this background. Just to give you a brief overview of what kind of environment was the environment that I collected data. So emerging information gaps is kind of the term that I try to give to the task design idea that I use. So it's unlike the one-way, two-way, or multi-way information gaps in SLA literature, I try to leave the information gaps. I did not impose any information gap to the participant at the beginning of the process, but I just left some clues over there so that the information gaps can emerge from their interactions. And I kind of try to call it emergent information gaps. I'll show an example. I designed an online task interface, and in this task interface it was possible to upload emergent information gap task using a website. There were 4 participants in each group in the data set, and there were 3 tasks in a row each week. So the data includes screen recordings of on-screen activities, including talk on Google Hangouts. So 70 hours of screen recordings, which means 7 hours of talk and interaction data, and 208 hours of screen orientations, also including the talk. So this is the task interface that I designed and where everything happens. So this is what the participants see. There is the title of the question at the top, and there is a textual clue over there, and there is a visual clue. The purpose is to combine these clues by discussing what they mean with the participants, or performing some Google searches or visiting any websites that they like to visit, and trying to make sense of these clues by discussing it and finding a particular single keyword as the answer. So when they come up with some candidate answers, they just type it over here and click submit button, and they receive a feedback. If it's correct, your answer is correct, just pops up in the feedback area. If it's wrong, it just says wrong answer, and they keep discussing about what these clues might mean. And there is also this current status chart. So when one of the participants come up with the correct answer and sees your answer correct, feedback, a tick appears here. This is important because in order to move on to the next task, every person in the group should earn a tick. So when there are 4 ticks, the system takes the participants to the next task. Or just like this one, if it's the 3rd task, it is over. And as you see, there are 5 themes over here, and they are kind of competing with each other. So the ticks are also available to the other groups so that they can see how the other participants are doing. Okay, so based on this idea, I was not part of the interaction, but at the beginning of the data collection, I instructed the participants about a single task rule, which is supposed to encourage the interaction. Which is, the rule is, do not tell the correct answer to the co-participant. So, if one of the participants finds the correct answer, that participant is not allowed to share the correct answer with the other participants. Instead, that participant should add new clues so that the other participant can find it as well. So facilitate the completion of the task by coming up with new clues. Add new clues to the environment so that everyone can find it. Because they all need to find it to move on to the next question. Basically, the rationale behind the clues, I was kind of trying to come up with these clues in a way to make it possible that they can find it by combining what they need. For example, this is an ISBN number, this is something related to the name of the book that the ISBN is given here, and the visual clue, the first name of the person over here is another clue. So when they kind of match all of these up, they find a single keyword as the answer. Sometimes it just took 1 minute for them to find the correct answer, and sometimes it just took 1 hour for them to find the correct answer. So I was nowhere involved to facilitate it, but they just took whatever time they need to spend on it. So this is how my data looks like. Screen recording, they are doing Google searches. This is my personal web page where this task interface is located. So they also do chat on Google Hangouts. As you see, sometimes audio, sometimes video. Right now this is video. They are looking at each other by just focusing on the screen. They also have many web pages open over there. Sometimes dictionaries, wiki pages, Google searches. They sometimes write all the clues next to each other and do a Google search, come up with nothing, and they try something else. They share everything they found on their screens, and this is where they bring their web searches to social interaction. Okay, what is the purpose? What did I try to do with this data? The first purpose was to have a closed loop into the interaction mechanisms of online antisocial interaction. And the second one is describing context-specific social actions and interactional achievements. So what kind of a context does the context that I design unfold in interaction? How do the participants treat it? And after understanding these first two items, evidencing the development, if there is any type of development of online interaction competence by tracking emerging context-specific resources longitudinally. So, the first study that we kind of try to understand what kind of a context it is. Sorry, I just noticed that I've been talking like 35 minutes non-stop. Sorry. So, the first output came out as part of a special issue on microanalysis of online data, and we kind of try to describe the coordination of online auto-interaction and orientations to task interface for epistemic progression. Epistemic progression is something important here because they are kind of trying to complete the task. So after some of them finds the answer, that person should facilitate so that other participants can find the answer as well. So they kind of, some of them know the answer, the other ones do not really know the answer. So they need to minimize the epistemic differences and complete the task. So there is always epistemic progression in the data. And they kind of do this coordinated work between their interaction in English language and by also showing orientations to the task interface that I just described. So the findings reveal the incorporation of online interaction, screen orientations, and knowledge co-construction for task accomplishment purposes. The participants coordinate their interactions with their orientations to the task interface to enact epistemic progression, which consequently turns the interface into a layered semiotic field and a screen-based resource in the course of knowledge co-construction. So for this specific article, we focused on feedback from the task interface, because the feedback from the task interface kind of change how the interaction unfolds from that moment on. Because something very different starts happening in terms of epistemics and interaction after they receive the positive feedback, the correct answer feedback from the task interface. Now one of them knows the correct answer, and that person is responsible for making others knowing the correct answer as well. So this is where they show orientation to the task interface, and they kind of turn the interface into a layer. And this gives us a screen-based resource, which is in this case orientation to task interface, to see the feedback, to receive the feedback, and to make the other participants oriented to task interfaces as well, to understand if one of them found the correct answer. And they are drawing on screen as a context-specific resource. And the resource being here, feedback from the task interface. They are using it as a resource. They see the feedback, and they see the other participants see the tick over there, so they know some of them found the correct answer. From that point on, they bring the sudden change in interaction to the online social interaction, and they start talking about it. So they are turning their screen into a resource here. So it kind of shows how we draw on Goodwin's cooperative action, because screen starts working as a layer. Of course, there are many other cases that the participants draw on their web searches, the things that they find on a wiki page. These are other examples that they turn the screen as a layer in interaction by just verbalizing what they found online and by just sharing what they found online with other participants. So they also do engage in the management of multiple resources, total task interface and text on the screen. The second output, thanks to Melinda's invitation, came out in the Literary Journal of Teaching and Learning Language and Literature. We focused on how these context-specific actions are recognized by the participants in different contexts. And luckily, we have two different data sets, which we'll also focus as part of the workshop. And we have a participant that is present in both data sets. And both data sets are task-oriented interaction. In my case, online emerging information gap. And in Olcay's case, it is L2 discussion tasks. So two different task types and two different contexts. So the result, just to briefly show the result, what kind of context-specific differences emerge in two different task-oriented interactional settings. In my data, online emerging information gaps, participants engage in turn design with short terms, unlike L2 discussion tasks, extended terms. So, in terms of progressivity, there are many cases of requests for confirmation information, because they need to request for information to move on for the purpose of task accomplishment. And orientation to setting in L2 discussion tasks, they orient to topic maintenance. But in my case, they orient to on-screen activities, because they need to know what's happening on their screens, and they need to draw on what's happening on their screens. So what does it give to us? It gives us two different contexts, two different resources, and the focal participants' recognition of different contextual configuration. So these findings are from the interactional group of participants, but the focal participant is present in both cases. So these participants can use these resources in two different settings. So it shows us this participant is capable of recognizing different contexts and different constraints that are imposed by the context or shaped by the context. So in terms of drawing on the content, it also gives us a display of situated interactional achievements, two settings, different resources, by orienting to context-specific requirement, thus evidencing L2 interactional competence, recognizing different contexts and accomplishing different contextual requirements, or using different context-specific social actions. So in terms of context-specific social actions, general pragmatic grid, orientation, task interface, and comparing to different settings was the output. So what about the longitudinal evidence for development? How these context-specific social actions change over time, or do they change over time? So 3 papers came out. This hasn't come out yet, it will be published in June. This came in last June, and this just came out yesterday. So I'll talk about 3 papers which all bring evidence, bring longitudinal evidence for relative interactional competence development. The first one, the computer-assisted language learning paper. We track the development of L2 interactional resources, of course, for online collaborative task accomplishment, accomplishing the task as a group. But specifically, we focused on how do these participants display their dynamic epistemic positioning. They need to make it clear to the other participants that they do not have access to the correct answer, so that they show that they are available for providing some hints, giving me some hints. Or the knowing participant, the participants who have access to the correct answer, should make it clear to the others, so that the others would know that he is now a valuable resource for task accomplishment. But does this always work out fine? No, it didn't. Earlier in the process, the participants have failed to enact congruent epistemic position by displaying and orienting to each other's epistemic status. So some of the participants who do not have access to the correct answer formulated some terms, including some hints in it. So they don't know what the correct answer is, but they provide some hints. Or just like, just the opposite. Some of the participants know what the answer is, but they fail to show, they fail to make it observable to the other participant that they know the correct answer. They fail to provide hints, or they just fail to show that they know the correct answer. And the progressivity of task-oriented online interaction, just because this failure to enact who knows and who doesn't know, kind of cause disruptions in the progressivity of tasks. They are competing with each other. Even if they are not competing with each other, they still know that they need to exchange knowledge to accomplish the task. But they kind of fail to do that. And the part that we focused on these studies was the part after one of the participants finds the correct answer. So there is definitely someone knowing the correct answer in the environment, so it is, there is still these failures observed. What's happening later in the process? They develop some interactional competences in NL2 to firstly avoid disruptions of progressivity and accomplish tasks collaboratively. So it kind of has been quite clear to each other who knows and who doesn't know, who has the resources to accomplish the task, so who will just lead everyone else to the task accomplishment, avoiding disruptions. And how did they do that? They started to deploy some interactional resources, just like confirmation, information, clarification, epistemic status checks to show that they know the correct answer, and to use some confirmation, information, and clarification and action requests to show that they are in need of some help to accomplish the task. Just to illustrate how this process unfolds, we use these tables to illustrate the progress. So this is how it looked in the first week. There are 18 weeks in the study. So in the first week, this is what's happened. Always disruptions to the progressivity of interaction. So too many disruptions. They cannot, they eventually accomplish the task, but it takes a lot of time for them to do it, because they have to stop due to the disruptions, they have to restore the maintenance of progressivity, and then they move on. And this is mainly also observable in the interactional resources that they use. That the less interactional resources that they use, the more disruptions is observable in the data. So limited number of resources was observable in the first week. So we move on to the middle of the process, week 8. What do we see? First thing we see is reduced number of disruptions. There are not as many differences in week 8. And we also see an increased number of resources. So they started deploying more interaction resources, and it just brought out the interactional consequence of having less disruptions. So we're going to the last week. No disruptions at all, and great diversification of interactional resources for doing epistemic position. All of these findings are based on conversation, analytic investigation of the data. All findings are based on micro-interactional details, and this is how they get to the final week of the process. No disruptions and great diversification of interactional resources for doing epistemic position. So the only focal social action in the study was doing epistemic position, and it was the result. So the paper that came out yesterday, I really like saying that because it feels good. Orientations to negotiated language and task group. So I already talked about that I instructed them to follow a task group, but I had no way to understand if they were orienting to this route prior to the interaction. I could only have access to that after I have the screen recordings, after I watch it. So they indeed oriented to these task groups, and they also co-constructed some other task groups, which was really interesting to see. So first thing they did in interaction was negotiation of existing task group, which is do not tell the correct answer to the other participants. So they negotiated. So how do we comply with this rule? How do we do this? What happens if one of us tells the correct answer? Nothing happens because I'm not watching on it. There is no teacher around, there's no moderator around, but they still comply with it because they negotiated it in interaction. And they also co-constructed 2 other rules as an extension to do not tell the correct answer rule. They also co-constructed the rule of we can tell wrong answers. So when they receive the wrong answer feedback from the interface, they said, I tried this and it's not working. Do not try it. Because they are trying to save some time. It makes sense. And the other rule was actually about language policy. I did not instruct them to speak English only, but it was kind of obvious. And they made this obvious thing, observable interaction. When someone made a production in Turkish language, they stopped that person. So I'll give some examples about that. So they negotiated these rules and they co-constructed some other rules, all observable in interaction. What happened longitudinally? What happened longitudinally is that they oriented to the rules that they negotiated and they co-constructed. And they brought evidence to that can be trackable in data. It happened with a continuum. Everything started with other policy. So they policed the breach of the task rule and the breach of the micro-level language policy with an other policy or an other repair. So longitudinally, it turned into self-policing, self-repair. So the participant who was policed due to the breach of the task rule started policing himself or herself. So rather than having anyone else giving the warning, initiating the repair, that participant did the repair himself or herself. So we see a continuum from other repair to self-repair. Let me show you an example. The task group, predetermined task group, do not tell the correct answer to the participants. Instead, start adding new clues. So here is an example extract. In line 9 here, we see second, which is the correct answer of the task. The participant finds it, produces it. And this is coming from the second week of all the 18 weeks. The participant produced the correct answer. So what happens in the following term? You shouldn't say the right answer directly, said one of the participants. And this is a great example for another repair and rule policy. One of the participant policies the breach of the rule. Do not tell us the correct answer. You shouldn't do that. And we also see the same participant in line 10 is repeating the other repair rule policy. Okay, you shouldn't say the right answer directly. Do not do that. What's happening in the following lines? It turns out that the participant who is polished here is giving an account because this participant has not received the feedback from the task interface yet. That participant does not really know that second is the correct answer, because you need the feedback from the task interface to understand if that's the correct answer or not. So I don't know which right answer is the account that participant gives, and what we see here is the participant apologizes. Sorry for breaching the task rule. So this is what's happening earlier in the process, and let's see what's happening longitudinally. We see this participant who was polished starts polishing herself. This is coming from the 8th week. Not tell the correct answer. So here, the answer to this question was the answer. So the participant came up with this when we found answer. And what happens next is really interesting. She marks noticing, oh, I just said it. She doesn't say I just said it, but she says, oh. She marks her noticing, reaching on the task rule. And what follows in the same turn is she reformulates what she just said when we found answer, and when we found, and she omits the part that breaches the task rule when we found. She also marks it suprasegmentally. There is the falling intonation when found, so there is no continuation. The falling intonation at the end, again, so there is nothing continuing. So before the other participants polish her again, she polishes herself and she restores the maintenance of progressivity. Because if someone had to polish or reach all the task rule, they will kind of lose some time and they need to restore the progressivity again to accomplish the task. So we see an example of self-repair and rule polish. Okay, the final paper. Task-induced development of hinting behaviors, which is coming up in next June in Language Learning and Technology. So after focusing on different context-specific social actions, I also focused on another one, hinting, something really important for the task interface that I designed, because they keep engaging in hinting. So is there a longitudinal development in terms of hinting? Was a question to look for, because it was all over the data. It was emerging from all of the weeks in the data. So it was also a thing to understand if the task design has any impact on the development of the participants, because they are doing hinting as an impact of the task design. They need to provide hints to accomplish the task. Okay, so development of hinting was the topic, and their hinting behaviors, of course, with time. And how they do it was the question, and they did it through diversification of resources for doing hinting. Just to briefly explain. So I tracked a focal participant, Z, and how she does hinting, of course, in interaction with the co-participants, and how does it happen longitudinally. Because it was a way to understand her increased ability to mobilize the baskets, to engage in hinting. Okay, so this is what's happening earlier in the process, V3. This is how she provides hinting after finding the correct answer. In Germany, SAT in Germany. So the correct answer to this is Berlin. She just says, in Germany, SAT in Germany. So she engages in hinting with a simple verbal clue. No orientations to the context, no orientation to any clues or the web searches they discussed. She just says a city in Germany. So what happens next? Silence, 1.9 seconds, and hesitation marker, 5.3 seconds of silence, which is huge interaction. So she fails to add more clues. She just says, in Germany, a city in Germany, and that's it. So what happens next? One of the co-participants requests for information. What is it? And another participant, yeah, so what? Request for continuation, so continue providing some other clues. Which city? What kind of a city? What can you tell us about the city? She doesn't give. So what happens next in response to this request? Another extended silence. So she fails to add more clues earlier in the process. So what happens earlier in the process is reliance on verbal clues and hinting sequences and failure to add more clues to mobilize a basket. Let's move on a little bit further. Week 14. This is what's happening in week 14. Again, she keeps using verbal clues, so it is part of her interaction repertoire, but she also starts doing something else, which I refer to as screen-based hinting, orientation to the screen to do hinting. And she also uses verbal clue, but she uses something else. Blah, blah, blah. She uses blah, blah to replace the correct answer. Because they are not allowed to tell the correct answer to each other, they come up with context-specific social actions. Blah, blah. They replace the correct answer with blah, blah, and it's a perfect solution. They find really easy after doing that. But what is also interesting here is that a combination of verbal clue, blah, blah, and a screen-based hinting. She is describing what she found as a result of her Google search. She's describing a page. Click here, go to that part, scroll down, and you will see something. The thing that you see is part of the answer. So this kind of page descriptions. And she's also doing that in a sequential, as a sequential action, stepwise, bits by bits, providing the hint to accomplish the task. So what we see here is an increased ability to manage a context-specific social action with the deployment of diversified resources. And just to show it with a graphic, first everything starts with reliance on verbal clues and failing to mobilize the best guess. But what we see later on is the emergence of screen-based hinting, blah blah, and some other resources, just like a designally incomplete utterance. So different resources emerge from the data. And through the end, hinting turns a sequencing practice. So from turn level, it moves on to sequential level. It does, it's unfold turn by turn. And she starts using diverse resources for hinting in combination and selectively. So first we have emergence, and then we have diversification of resources, and sorry. This diversification shows us development of L2 interaction competence, and this development is induced by the task design as an impact of task design. So this is what I'm trying to kind of refer to as task-induced development of L2IC and task-induced development of online L2 interaction competence action. So, based on these research outputs, how to conceptualize online L2 interaction competence? I mean, there are different outcomes from the data set, there are different findings. How do they fit into each other? To have an understanding of how online L2 interaction competence is different than interaction competencies in any other social interactional settings. First of all, something which is really important. Online, it can be task-oriented or some other purpose of interactions. But online environments are rich interactional domains with access to limitless number of resources. Because you can just do anything using Google. You can just visit a wiki article, you can just find a website that has valuable information in it, and you can start talking about it, or you can use a dictionary. You can do everything on a screen. So online interactional settings kind of opens a gate to entire world, an entire world that can be brought into interaction. And bringing these resources into interaction requires coordinated management of talk and screen-based resources, the first paper. So how do they coordinate is kind of a point to further investigate. And how do they recognize the contextual configurations? How do they show their recognition of these contextual configurations? How do they draw on the affordances of the context? It can be something like the task interface I use, or it can be a simple Google search. How do they do it? And how do they bring it to their interaction? And explicating touch recognition to co-participants, turn by turn, and establishing, restoring, and maintaining mutual understanding in the meantime, minute by minute. So each episode of online interaction shapes context and is shaped by the content. Therefore, only a microanalytic investigation into these domains can show us how interaction resources emerge and are deployed and diversified longitudinally, because we're focusing on social interaction in online settings. So the way to do it is to track their emergence. If you're interested in tracking the longitudinal, first track the emergence and see how they are deployed in interaction, and then track how they diversify over time. And locating such shared interactional achievements is what is referred to as online interactional competence. And tracking their longitudinal change, development of online interactional competence, or online learning in interaction is the premise of conversation analysis for L2 interaction research. So what is the next step? Where do we go from here? The first thing which might be done is to come up with some further contributions to the concept of online L2 interaction competence. We describe a context based on a single task interface. But what about other online interaction contexts? What are the context-specific social actions that emerge from various online interaction settings? And maybe data collection from diverse online interaction settings, just like telecollaborative exchanges. How do things work in telecollaboration might be another venue to conduct further research. And how to integrate research outputs to teaching and teacher education might be another important venue to take it further. And some other plans to take it to the next stage is to turn the task interface into a publicly available digital task design tool. I have a cool name for it, if you agree. So I'm kind of trying to turn it into something publicly available. The task interface I just showed you was only available to me, and it was not really well developed for the entire public to use for workflow purposes. And using these conversational findings, another thing to do would be to revisit the findings in SLA and code literature with a recalibrated route informed by this kind of understanding of online L2 interaction competence, and based on underpinnings of conversation analysis as a research methodology. Thank you for listening.
I was wondering the things that you tracked there, like classification and stuff, and so on, they sort of were focusing on the developments within one person. I was wondering whether you saw other people picking up similar types of strategies. I mean, one that you mentioned that was rather interesting with the blah blah, replacing. Did anybody else start using similar types of sort of strategies or methods to it's a hint.
Blah blah, interestingly, it occurred the same for all of the participants, because after one of them uses it, of course the other participant pick it up and starts using it. So blah blah was all over the place. But I don't really have any claims that the same type of development happens in the same way for other participants. So this was just one of the participants. So I did not really track the other participants, or I tracked, but I did not really report as a paper. The focus on the paper was on the one of the participants. So there are different developmental movements, and it's not always linear, of course. So there are different developmental patterns in different participants, but the focal one just moved on with this verbal clues and blah blahs and some other resources, and bringing them all together.
I was just thinking about the co-construction, as you say, that they're not working in isolation, are they? So as a group, we could also sort of look at the diversification of their hinting, even though I understand we can't do all of it within the confines of one paper.
But the thing is, when you kind of describe how a focal participant does it, you also describe how other participants do it as well, because it's an interaction, and the others are orienting to that. I mean, deploying now similar resources from different participants could give us maybe some different results, but it will still be the same in terms of the focal participant using this sort of emergence of these resources. Maybe one of the participants used it in week 1, but the other participants started using it in week 4. It also depends on who finds the correct answer first, so it's another element there.
That's a terrific presentation. A whole bunch of questions, but just to be very focused, we can talk later. A little bit following on Michael's, that's not me, is it? Am I making that through my vocal cord somehow? That would be really weird if it were the case, but so you have done a really nice job of tracking individual shifts and an augmentation in interactional competence. So at the very beginning of your data collection, when they're orienting themselves to the task, I don't know if you have much data from literally week 1, when they're first trying to figure out what to do. And this is a bit more Vygotskian than conversation analytic or ethnomethodological, but as you come to actually, I don't believe in tasks per se as something that are blueprints that explain behavior. Rather, tasks are kinds of orientations that then are acted on or enacted in incredibly heterogeneous ways in groups, right? So as that initial moment of trying to figure out that environment and figure out what's going on there was taking place, I mean, I would really love to see, in addition to the week 3 and week 9 and week 15 period or 14 period, what was happening at the very beginning when they were literally creating the activity that then would sort of congeal enough to have a coherent trajectory, you know? And I'm wondering what we could learn about the ways in which the cultures of use of internet communication tools from other environments and prior experience was mapping into this, and just from a computer-assisted language learning and a more Vygotskian side, those are all factors that likely are contributing to the ways in which these activities and the very beautiful microanalytic analysis you've done subsequently play out. So it's kind of the backstory to some of what you showed us. And I don't know if you could just casually talk about that at all, or is that a coherent question, by the way?
Yes.
If it's not, you're welcome to.
Yes. Thank you very much. Something I did not really mention in the presentation, maybe that's my fault, but all of the longitudinal studies have findings from the first week as well.
Okay. Yeah.
So I could not show all the extracts here, so that was the main problem. And yeah, I always try to start seeing things from the very first moment.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, one of the extracts that will focus in the workshop from my data will be from the very first encounter to the task interface and the task environment. And the paper that will be published in the Literary Journal is actually the table that I showed, context-specific social actions. They are they come from very first orientations to different context-specific environments, so different contexts. So the first encounter with the new task type and the resources that focal participant uses in that.
Face-to-face versus online.
Yes.
First encounters.
Yeah.
So that data is available.
Were any of the participants co-present with you during, say, the initial orientation or training session for the use of this tool, or?
I held an introduction meeting with all participants, just to show them how to log into the task interface and talk about the task group, this is what you are supposed to do. And I also showed them how to record their screens and how to share it with me as the researcher.
Yeah.
But while they are having interaction, I was just clueless. I didn't really know what's happening there. Except in the admin page or the task interface, I could retrieve some reports when they found the correct answer and how they are doing. But for the online interaction aspect, I did not have an access. Only after I have the recordings, I could see.
So just to be clear, they weren't sharing a screen. You could see the text showing up, but you couldn't see other people's cursor or other people's submission of candidate responses to the caption. Okay, I guess that would be impossible.
Yeah, they only see the text.
Right? Okay.
And they usually understand. After seeing the text, one of the participants announced, I found the answer. I found the answer is all over the place. So when someone finds it, that participant announces it. I found the answer and everything moves on from that point on.
Yeah, okay.
So it's mainly based on tool to do how screen might work in different screens, their own screen.
No,
this is how they bring it to interaction.
Absolutely. It's kind of like an infogap task or something where they have to figure out from what's going on. So, yeah, great. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? I have one. I wrote it down somewhere. It's a small thing, but it's confusing. I can just
You should have so many questions there.
Well, and I can see your screen. You wrote a novel.
No, I was taking notes.
And novel questions too.
No, it was a small thing, but I think you said something about that they turned the screen into a layer. And my question here is, isn't it always a resource? Isn't it a potential resource that then becomes activated or something? I know it's a question of terminology, but I think epistemologically it is important.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. It is always there.
Yeah.
But it is not activated until they activate it, until they bring it to interaction. So it is something seen but unnoticed.
Yes. So perhaps it's a potential resource. It's always there.
It's always a potential resource.
Because the way you said, I thought it was as if it wasn't.
No, it's always available. They can talk about their screens anytime. But the paper focused on the feedback aspect. It was a single case analysis, so on a 90 seconds of interaction, the part was about that. So what happens after they receive feedback and how everything starts moving on after that point on was the focus. But it's available.
I mean, the reason I'm asking is because of the conversation that Stephen and I had this morning a bit about how the intermediation, the cognition through the intermediation is articulated through the way you interact in the world. So there's this infinite potential resources.
But that's why I like online interaction. It's always, I mean, I refer to that as limitless numbers of resources because they can do anything on their screens and they are free to choose what to bring to interaction and what not to bring to interaction. So it's up to them. So we only focused on these actions when they brought it to interaction because that was made observable to the others by them, not before. But it's always a potential resource.
Can I just have one more? I really don't want to ask anything else. Do you have questions? Come on, guys. So
You already said a bunch of questions. So.
I do have, I don't want to ask them all now, but we have to drink beer while we ask some questions. That's later. So the idea of the task, so we have documented evidence of changes in micro-interactional visualized behaviors, right? So these utterances that are doing more work and you've established a greater repertoire of interactional resources associated with interactional competence. Did they get better at the task? So were they solving these faster? Were some teams that were crappy at the beginning when they're still learning how to do this, all of a sudden winning later when they also mapped more interactional resources or made publicly available more of these interactional competencies that you've documented elsewhere?
Quantitatively speaking, no. I mean, it was not a linear development. They did not start finishing the task really quick after coming up with these resources. Because the tasks were always different.
Yeah.
So sometimes it was really difficult to bring the clues together, so sometimes it was my fault to use the clues. But the Interactional Resources made it quicker after one of them finds the correct answer. So if someone comes up with the correct answer, things started moving fast, but not in a linear development again, because some of the correct answers were kind of a little bit more difficult to describe using some hints compared to others. For example, I sometimes gave something as correct answer, which is not even a word, but an acronym or something like that. So they need to describe it at a different level. So compared to time, I cannot really talk about a linear development. So it did not get them to finish quicker always.
So we're recently, when I was with Johannes Wagner and others in Denmark, we had opportunity to do some rereading of early Garfinkel, particularly his 1967 volume, his 70-piece also on the critical importance of indexicality. So fundamentally, all human communication is about sharing a set of reference, right? I mean, figuring out what we mean together. And we may have very different actual real-world reference for the kinds of signification going on in language use, but that's fundamentally what we're doing together when we talk, is creating this intersubjective space, which is fundamentally a set of shared indexicalities, right? So as people get better at doing interactional competence, you presume that we get better at establishing in-group, maybe ephemeral, just for this 15-week term, heuristics that allow us to map more quickly to shared indexicality. And in the studies that John Hellerman and I are doing, looking at, wandering around and having to find 5 different locations on campus and doing an oral report and all this stuff, the first step takes 3 or 4 times longer than the second step, which is then longer than the third, fourth, and fifth. And they just simply get better at figuring out what to do, and almost Wittgensteinian, like non-representational approaches to language, kind of having this shared inference about what it is that we do next and what a reasonable next action might be, that is just much more quickly effectuated. And I would imagine that if you actually looked at video recordings that established how long students were doing these activities, there's probably a reduction in overall time per unit. I mean, I'm not sure that this is so interesting, mind you, but what it infers is this capacity that humans, we've established, learn to do together. You come across someone that you don't know well, it takes you forever to figure out what each other's talking about. Lots of instances of repair, et cetera, especially in intercultural or cross-linguistic, cross-cultural interactions. So when you finally start figuring each other out, sometimes you err still, of course, don't get it right, but you're much better at figuring out what each other's talking about, what we're really needing to do together here. And I'm just curious if, in a more gestalt way, that might map in interesting ways to these very microanalytically established pieces of evidence you have for interactional competence showing up in the discourse.
Actually, the language and rule coaching is an example to that, because they spend some time to negotiate the rules and co-construct some rules earlier in the process, so it's something procedural, but they stopped doing it. And they kind of treat it as something given, because they already discussed it. So it's something, in terms of the procedural details of the interaction in my environment, this can be an example, but I'm sure there are many other examples.
But that's a great example. Yeah. So you actually have shifts in participation structures based on pre-established rules that then map forward to inform future action. Right? That's it. Yeah.
And this kind of relates to one last question I had. That with the comparison of the tasks, speaking from a pedagogical point of view, as a teacher educator, and like you said, through indexicality, people learn to get along better, to achieve in the end more quickly, etc., etc. In a classroom, you would call that you're learning to the classroom ecology and to speak the language of the class, right? And to read the teacher, whatever. So I wondered if, from an L2 teacher's point of view, or FL teacher's point of view, if the other task, the dialogic task, is much more effective for language development than one where they can take shortcuts through these inferences that they have that you're using here. I don't know. I mean, it's just a question that they might want to debate.
I mean, maybe in terms of the amount of L2 produced, then with tasks like this, you would find minimalization, for example. It would be something that is something that has been revealed in task-based interaction research before, which is not maybe probably ideal for a language teacher, because they would be happy with longer utterances and all that. But then a task like this one, for example, then paves the way for negotiation, and then for maybe more rapid turn taking and all that. That's also another level of it. But in terms of production of L2 structures, and if you look at this as language as linguistic output, then yeah, maybe for different aspects of learning, then the discussion task would be more ideal. But then again, there are two different task types for different purposes.
I wouldn't really compare them to find which one is better, because they have different resources to facilitate the emergence of in different settings. So the comparison.
It's important for a teacher to be able to recognize that's good, that contributes to.
I mean, if the purpose is
knowledge we have of this will get this result instead of this, so generally we know that knowledge.
And both are, in a way, providing opportunities for L2 use, and then a task like the one that Ufuk designed, it would also be, let's say, representative of language gaming in an L2, which happens, around the world, and then that would give that kind of language socialization opportunity to L2 speakers who are not normally maybe playing games in L2, or maybe some are doing. In countries like Sweden and Denmark, it's, for example, more common for teenagers to play games in English, and then that's where they pick their language, but maybe not in Turkey. So it again brings in something in terms of what people do with an L2 in the outside world, and then even maybe more natural than a discussion task sometimes. So different levels of, let's say, L2 use in different contexts.
Okay.
That's my take.
I think you deserve a break.
not you.